Hello everyone, Stitched here, and it's time for another review about the episode Uprooted. I saw this episode yesterday, and I have to say, wow, it was really more than I really expected. This was actually more focused on the Young Six than previously. We haven't seen much of a Young Six episode before, well, since season 8. But in this particular takes place sometimes after that the Tree of Harmony had been destroyed by Sombra. But for some reason, the Young Six responds to some sort of magical summons from the Tree of Harmony, but that was actually being destroyed. So the question here is, how would the tree be able to send a magical summon to Young Six if the tree itself and the element was gone? Well, it turns out even the tree was actually destroyed, but the spirit of the tree managed to survive somehow in, well, some magical way. When the Tree of Harmony was gone, even the main six were very curious but mostly worried. How would they defend Equestria now without the elements? When the Young Six arrived to school much earlier to see, well, it turns out they were doing actually on summer break, and most of them actually left home without telling anyone, especially their parents or at least their legal guardians. And also, most of all, this was actually very much, well, I had to say, very, very unbelievable. But most of all, this episode were actually a little more than I expect. But when they arrived to school to see Twilight, but I was surprised to see them back so early. She thought, had she put the date on the arrival to school would be open after summer and a different date? But they explained they were summoned by the Tree of Harmony. But Spike, for all those characters, looked at them and was puzzled. Because it seems that the Young Six never was unaware about the trees being destroyed. This was actually makes sense since they were on their summer break from school, and that the Tree of Harmony was destroyed only a moment ago. Only the previous episode. So that would actually explain that since they were on summer vacation and the tree was being destroyed by them. But the reaction to see from Spike and Twilight hearing the tree has been destroyed, and they asked to see if they could go see it. But since the Tree of Harmony is gone, it seems the tree itself was maintaining this, keeping the forest, every forest in check, in place. Without the tree, the forest could no longer be as safe as before. But she allows them to go to see it by themselves. And they could never believe it. They actually didn't believe at first. But after they arrived there, it seems they wanted to have this they decided to honor the trees in memory in some way, believing that they were reason, but they believed that was the reason why they were summoned by the tree, or at least the spirit of the tree, at least to the area. But then, Thorax arrives and angrily at Lucilius that she'd been leaving the changing kingdom without telling anyone. It turns out also that anyone of the other Young Six hasn't told anyone. But since then, Twilight said, let the rest go back and stay, but as long as they have permission from each kingdom. So they all went back home, trying to get some information from the families and kingdom leaders to carry out their mission to help the Tree of Harmony. And since Sambar was a pony, so he had no problem for that. But it was his one, for one of those things, they had to actually somehow do some chores proving they were allowed to go. But especially from Gallus, well, Gallus was very one character that I expect not to be so fast, because since he is an orphan and not to ask Grandpa Gruff for permission, he didn't have to say a word before he opened, took the paper, signed it, and gave it right back without saying a word. Well, except for the coffee. That is some sort of some reaction that I didn't expect. But otherwise, this was more than expected. But when the other young six arrived, they found out that Sandbar had literally removed all the pieces of the Tree of Harmony. They started the argument discussing what to do about the place. Since Gallus' idea to memorize the Tree of Harmony turned into a cave to house, into a museum to at least telling the story of this origin. Smolder's idea to sculpt a giant rock statue of the Tree of Harmony as a monument of its power. Silverstein's cover to cover the place in color paints, and that Ocella's idea to build a meditation garden within a fountain, water fountain, and some other things. But this led to one of the most actually led to this big argument between all of them, discussing what and how to do, which idea was the best one. But this book could have led, if this argument, if they didn't came up to peace with each other, this argument could have led to the end of the friendship. And they probably had left school and went back to the kingdoms, and that would be the end of the young six appearance. But they actually then recall being hiding together into this castle above them, which means in the first episode, the second episode, School These Days, Part 2 in Season 8. And from that moment, after they managed to build this some sort of tree house, but then suddenly the pieces of the tree, which turns out that Sambar actually had placed them in a cart, but never chucked them so far away, only just around the corner in the cave. And then suddenly, after the tree house was built, this enormous building appeared, and it seems a tree from the first state to the first former tree sites was now almost like 3, maybe 4 times the biggest, or at least to double the size. And it was more as a tree and a house, as a grand tree house, but appeared also at the same time as a tree. That is a big surprise. I didn't expect the tree itself to be growing to this. But the song, The Place Where It Will Belong, was also very touching music. But it was a very epic series, at least episode in this part. And since this was the first episode with the Young Six in focus since Season 8, Episode 2, I believe this will gonna be one of the best episodes with the Young Six, or some other people call the Student Six. But, well, I prefer calling Young Six. But it's still from this, the spirit of Tree of Harmony appears before the Young Six once again and commands them to keeping its spirit alive by their friendship and selfishness. It turns out that it seems the young six friendship with them perhaps even much stronger than the main six are. As Twilight explained that the reason the tree and the element still remains, changing the suit of Equestria's needs and needing the young six help to do so. It turns out that it seems almost the spirit of harmony, at least the spirit of the Tree of Harmony, has been choosing the young six as the new inheritors, or at least the bearers of the elements. But will we see the elements after this? Only time can tell, since we know that the elements was destroyed until Ocellus somehow, with their help from their friends, put the pieces back together, but I'm not so sure if those elements part can be useful anymore. But perhaps they can be restored by their friendship's magic, as the main six did. Because in season 1, the main six used the elements for the first time over 1,000 years. And since then, Luna and Celestia lost their connection to the elements. So it turns out maybe it is that the main six connection to the elements are at the same thing. Like they have been passed over the title, or at least the bearers, to the next generation of the young six. So who knows? Perhaps the young six could be the next heroes of Equestria and perhaps even the kingdoms. So over time, who knows? But I have to say this was actually a very touchy moment between the young six, to seeing how the arguments between it was almost like a fighting could have almost led to the end of the friendship, but managed to reconcile their differences and come to peace and forgave each other. From that, I give this episode an A+ rating. And I would like to hear all of you what you all think about the episode Uprooted. And that was all to say. And as always, subscribe, leave a comment, and as always, this is Switch Diablo over and out.